Welcome to Fully Engaged with Jennifer N. Sutherland, where we explore thoughtful conversations about navigating the intricate world of leadership, learning, and organizational development.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Lisa. Let me give you a brief intro and then we're going to get right into the questions. So I want everybody to know how amazing you are and sort of the background for what we're going to talk about today. So Lisa is the founder and CEO of Innovative Learning Group, a company she established in 2004 with a passion for building a business, supporting her employees, and prioritizing client needs. With nearly 4 decades of experience in learning and performance improvement industry, Lisa is a dynamic and respected leader who has consulted with numerous Fortune 1000 companies on learning and performance strategies, earning multiple accolades for her dedication to the field and her company's growth. Lisa, welcome to Fully Engaged.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a lot, but thank you.
All well-deserved, well-earned. I like to make sure you have a good introduction because you are really well-established in the industry, and I think people need to know that. And when I say respected leader, I mean by many, many people, including myself, which is why I'm so thrilled that you're on the podcast today. So thank you for joining us.
Looking forward to it.
So we're going to talk today about learning and development. We're going to talk about performance improvement. But let's start with what inspired you to even find the inspiration to start Innovative Learning Group? How has your vision changed over the past 20 years?
Oh my goodness. Well, it was 21 years ago. In fact, 21 years ago next week that I started the company. And unfortunately, a few of us worked for another consulting firm that closed its doors. And so we had kind of a quick decision over the weekend to either update our resumes or for me to start a company. And for whatever reason that weekend, it seemed like starting a company was the better option. So I don't think my vision has really changed because it's always been to serve our clients with performance improvement and training and performance support solutions. And so we continue to do that to this day.
So you haven't expanded to like 12,000 other things. You've stuck with what your focus was and you continue doing that just really, really well.
Well, you make a good point. I mean, it's easy to get distracted and go after each kind of new topic or technology or shiny penny. And we certainly keep pace with learning technology, but we stick to our knitting, if you will.
I love that. How do you define performance improvement? When we talk about that in the learning industry, performance improvement, what does that mean to you? Why do organizations even care?
Well, and I like how you couch it in the learning and performance industry because I think it comes up for us because so often we get asked to build training. And in the back of our minds, we think, training's the right solution if people lack skill and knowledge. But if they have that skill and knowledge and they're not performing well, something else is going on. So we often, all of us, stumble upon this idea of performance improvement, which is the idea that we want people to do their jobs better, or we want them to do something differently, or start doing something, or stop doing something. We want them to do their jobs better so the organization gets better results. So the end goal is not to do training. The end goal is that people perform better. And training is great if it's the right solution.
I think that's such a great comment. All over LinkedIn right now, there are so many great conversations about this exact topic. Is training for training's sake? No, the outcome of training is supposed to be a performance improvement, a behavior change, knowledge transfer that does something. It's not just for the sake of having that knowledge, but what do you do with it? And performance improvement, performance management, performance in general is that outcome, is the performance of the organization or the person or what have you. So I love how that ties together.
Well, and then that in turn, that improved performance helps you either increase sales or increase profit or increase compliance or, decrease safety incidences. So one of those dashboard measures for most companies.
Also a great point. Like to me, probably early in my career, I didn't quite understand how strongly tied L&D or performance outcomes should be tied to the business. And that is definitely something that I think transforms a learning and development team, a learning team, a performance team to understanding when you're trying to get funding for something, if you're trying to get time and energy, subject matter experts involved, you have to be able to tie that to something the organization cares about, that senior leaders are going to say, yes, that matters to me, right? That's probably one of the reasons why compliance training is thought of in the way it does, because it's typically a check the box type of thing. You need compliance training. Somebody says you have to. If you don't, you get in trouble. But a senior leader is not going to be like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited we get to do compliance training.
Yes.
But is it tied to a business outcome? Yeah. Are we gonna maybe lose an RFP if we haven't done that and we can't show it, or, get fined by somebody, whatever the case is? But I
Yes.
I I think that tying any of those outcomes to a business outcome, like you said, the generating revenue, decreasing costs, or increasing what have you. I love that. I love that idea. Um, so this podcast is about being engaged in the workplace, but also just workplace culture, organizations. What can you have an example of maybe how ILG has helped change an organization's culture through your work?
I guess one example comes to mind is we've done a lot of work recently with an organization and their sales function or sales enablement function, and it's probably 800 sales professionals, and so it's really the first time they've had formal and informal learning. Prior to this, it was a lot of marketing collateral. I mean, thousands and thousands of pieces of marketing collateral. So no shortage of content. But what we were able to do is kind of outline levels of learning and a progression through the learning. And as you progressed higher through the learning, it included more and more practice and more, especially for salespeople, role plays and doing things with your managers and getting sign off and rubrics and certification. So it really brought some more rigor, but also just like a roadmap for these salespeople to follow.
I love that. And most of my career has been training salespeople. There's always been a little bit of extra, general sort of corporate wide training, things like that. But sales training has always been sort of my sweet spot. And it is really impressive to me when you can establish a true sales enablement function, the difference it can make on a sales team. I was a sales rep for 10 years of my career. Sales enablement wasn't even a term then.
Yeah.
So when I think about, how, like that idea of enablement and how that translates and why we don't use that term in like the corporate training environment, why does sales only get the enablement function versus everybody? But I love how that example of utilizing the structured and sort of the implementation of that from a sales perspective, because a strong sales team can have a huge impact on an organization's culture as a whole. When sales is doing well, everybody's happy. When sales is not doing well, most people are a little concerned and stressed out about it. So it's such a huge part of the business.
For sure. Well, and the great thing about sales is enablement is it's really that kind of holistic picture. It's
Yes.
almost like we talk about the learning ecosystem. It's almost kind of that same idea for sales, that it's more than just training and
Yes.
skill building that helps a target audience do better.
I love that. Yeah, because it's not just the material, right? You talked about this organization having plenty of material, but what do you do with it, and how do you create like the ladder for the training and the outcomes? And sales enablement looks at all of that. Looks at even what emails should be sent to clients in a certain time frame, and
Yes.
how the digital sales rooms that they have now, which are fantastic, things like that.
Yes.
Um, so when you think about learning and development, we'll look at it as like sort of a general universal term. What do you think are some of the key changes or the big challenges that organizations are facing related to L&D?
I think what keeps changing is the technology. And what doesn't change is kind of the human makeup or our physiological makeup. For us to change as humans would take thousands and thousands of years. So our brains are really not changing. Our bodies are really not changing. So good performance improvement principles stay the same. Good instructional design principles stay the same. What we see keeps changing is the technology. So then it's up to us as learning professionals to be good stewards of the technology and to really understand what's that technology good for, what's it not good for, how can it be a support? Because otherwise, I think we run the risk of only using, for example, some of the e-learning tools, but not employing good instructional design. So I think we're at risk of leaving the super important critical instructional design principles behind just to use tools.
I think that is such a great point. And it's every conference I go to, I'm overwhelmed at the amount of technology and what's out there, and how do they blend in together? How do we talk about the tech stack. How do they work together? There used to be an LMS, now there's LXPs, and now there's all of these. And I love that you said it's so true. Like the philosophy, the theories, the key components of learning and development, performance management, and performance improvement have stayed consistent because the way we learn stays consistent. Um, but all the other sort of components of it, it's what's been changing. So when I think about the L&D field or industry, if you want to say, there's a lot of things that have been happening. There's probably been a lot of changes you've seen in the past 21 years. What are some of the trends that are sort of catching your attention that your team is noticing that you're, either staying on top of or kind of watching and waiting to see sort of what happens?
Yeah, and there certainly a lot of them have to do with technology, whether it's, augmented reality and virtual reality, or if it's artificial intelligence, AI. Um, Certainly another one is micro learning. People want things shorter, but I always think about, okay, if it takes us, I think there's a whole book, it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert at something. That's a lot of little pieces of micro learning. So I think even the trends, they're all great, but it's when do they make sense? When does micro learning make sense? It has a place, but micro learning is not always the answer, for example. So again, if you can go back to those performance improvement and instructional design roots and principles, they will guide you to figure out what to do with those new trends. And for a while gamification was a trend, or social learning was a trend. Well, those things have been around since the cavemen. So, what about it is new or different, and what are the parts and pieces of it that we want to use with our learning?
Competition has always been a thing.
Yeah, we need something new to talk about, or something old and make it new to talk about.
Right.
Yeah.
And I love that you mentioned that microlearning is great and it has its place, but it's not always the solution. And I know I have sometimes had, when there's a training need in an organization, somebody comes to me and says, "Oh, we need it to be this." Okay. How about you let me figure this out based on what we talk about? Let's do an intake. Let's have an actual conversation to figure out what's the solution. So I love that you mentioned AR and VR. Is there an example of either one of those that you could share that you worked on or that you've seen has been like the right solution based on a training need?
I mean, so virtual reality, because you have the headset or goggles and because you have hand controls, you can teach skills because you can physically manipulate an object. You can move it, you can twist it, you can put it over here, you can spin something with your hand. Because of that, so virtual reality is really great for skill building. So, use cases around that then are things that are dangerous, things that are expensive to recreate, things that are just plain difficult to recreate, like an active shooter or an earthquake kind of first responder scenario. Those things are super hard to recreate in a classroom. So better to recreate those um, in the headset. And so you just want to think always about the ROI, like anything we do. All right, how many people are going to go through it over what amount of time? How much time will it save them in that kind of speed to proficiency? All those costs versus what will it cost to build it? And that math formula will tell you if it's a use case that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. The ROI is critical and the speed to competency. So there was the time that I was talking to a potential client. This is when we were doing I was doing business process outsourcing,
Yeah.
and they needed to train people on how to use a specific robot. And VR could have been really fantastic, but they only needed 1 or 2 people a month to get some sort of training. And I was like, cost benefit analysis here. I'm not sure you're going to want us to build this for you. It just doesn't seem like it's worth it. But it was a challenge for them to truly try to find a solution because people were distributed. And yeah, I appreciate that. And the idea of speed to competency is another huge one. Having trained in call center environments, speed to comp is huge. The sooner you can get somebody taking phone calls, that's what you're hiring them for, or whether it's, as soon as somebody can be an effective salesperson or what have you. I love the idea. That's one of the key metrics I like to think about when it comes to training is that speed to competency. Um, it's sometimes hard to measure, but I think it's such a critical one for us to think through. Um,
Well, and it's so I think it's probably easier if you talk directly to the business people. If you're talking to the manufacturing people or the quality people, they have that ROI like this because that's what they live and breathe. And especially then if you go down the safety and danger and risk category, for example, if you can save a limb or a life, what's the ROI on that? That's an easy one.
Fantastic. That's a great example. When I was in the call center worlds, our call center operations managers knew those call center metrics like that. You're exactly right. So those were so quick. And the rest of the business was the one who was like, well, what's the value of that? Oh, I can tell you exactly. That's exactly how soft people are. Like, I got that. I got it. Uh, I'm going to talk a little bit about leadership here. So when you are working with your team or with clients, can you tell me about a time that you've had to pivot like your leadership style to work with somebody a little bit differently based on that interaction?
I think it's really about meeting people where they are. It doesn't do any good to kind of ram a solution down somebody's throat or try to make somebody something they're not. So it's really kind of start where they are, have some shared vision of where you're trying to get to together, talk about a lot of options, be open minded and curious, really listen so you understand what's going on in their world, and then together figure out what the best solution is. So I think it's meeting them where they are.
How do you help organizations build a culture of accountability and ownership? Like that's really critical right now. So many companies are struggling with, you know, their employee base, making sure they have the right number of people doing the right amount of things, focus on the right things. How do you help an organization sort of build that culture of accountability and ownership around employees?
I think so much of it comes to, some I guess it's a way to look at performance improvement is do people know what's expected of them? Do they have the tools to do it? Do they have the skills to do it? And if you get real focused on those things and those tasks, like if everybody comes to work every day and knows what they're supposed to do and knows how to do it, you're going to move the needle a long way. So I think the challenge is not staying up at a real conceptual level for too long because it's great we know our why and our purpose statement, great, but pretty quickly on the heels of that I need to know, what do you want me to do today? Do I have the tools to do it? Do I have the skills to do it? Let's go. And then do you have a way to check some measures, how my productivity, and give me some feedback and keep going.
I think that's so great. One of the things I always tell leaders, especially when we're rolling out performance, like the performance management, the cycle, yeah, is I always say there's going to be company goals. We know your employees are going to have goals, but tie your goals to the company goals and to your people's goals. Like let them know how what they're doing impacts you, what you're doing impacts them, how that impacts the business. People care about that, right? They feel connected to it as opposed to just, oh, you're just having me spin this plate for no reason and not know how it's tied to anything. So that connection I think is so fantastic that you tied into that.
Well,
Um,
and I think a tool that you and I are both familiar with that helps with that is the impact map.
yes,
Because it helps you start with the business goals and say, okay, well, how are we going to reach those business goals? We got to do these job results. Well, how do we do these job results? We do these critical tasks. Well, how do we do these critical tasks? Well, we need these skills and knowledge. And so, as learning professionals, we just need to teach those skills and knowledge because then you have that line of sight to the business goals. And it's just like you said, we don't have people learning skills and doing tasks that don't line up and align with our business goals.
absolutely. And sometimes you see people want to learn certain things in their goals for their own professional development or personal development, which is great. But there has to be something that ties back to the business. What
Absolutely.
As you have worked in this field for many years, what are some of the big I don't know, mistakes or errors or challenges that people have when it comes to implementing learning and development initiatives? What sort of mistakes are organizations making?
Well, when I hear implementing, I think, okay, you've spent a lot of time and energy analyzing a problem, designing a problem, developing a solution, and implementing then is get it out there. It's the Nike, go do it. So I think the thing that sometimes goes wrong is it doesn't get implemented the way it was designed. Especially because more and more we see that blended learning with a whole lot of performance support is good, but it has lots of parts and pieces. So sometimes it can be challenging to implement, make sure the learners take all those parts and pieces in the manner in which it was designed. So you can't just spend a lot of energy designing and building and then kind of throw it over the fence. You have to take just as much care and guidance and feeding with that implementation to make sure it gets implemented the way you intended it to.
Is that something that your team helps with as well in addition to designing? Do you help with the strategy for the implementation?
Yeah, as much with the strategy and the plan. Usually it falls to often, right? It falls to the managers because the managers are the ones that are
Right.
there day to day. Hey, do you have that tool? Is that working here? Try it out and let me watch and give you a little feedback. Let's do it together. That's where the manager has to come in.
So I know we've talked about learning and development. We talked about improvement. Performance improvement, I know, is something that is really an important part of what you like to focus on. You've been very, very active in ISPI. Share with us what is ISPI and what have you gained from being a part of that organization?
Sure. Yep. ISPI, it's a great acronym. It stands for the International Society for Performance Improvement. And and as an organization, it's just a little broader. It's kind of that umbrella for performance improvement. Um, because training as a solution or an intervention, kind of a geeky word, is just one thing you might implement to solve a performance problem. You might do something around communication. You might do something around compensation. You might hire different people. You might define a job a little bit differently. So it's a whole organization that looks at that umbrella and how to do that analysis, almost like that diagnosis or that problem solving. So you make sure you solve the right problem and put the right solution in place for that. So I joined the organization, boy, in the late 80s when I was in grad school and, got involved here in Michigan on a committee. And then, you're chairing a committee and pretty soon you're on the board. And I was the president here in Michigan and then chaired an international conference and then got on the international board as treasurer and then president. So it was really a very cool and rewarding kind of progression with a volunteer organization in a way to give back to the community and learn and meet great people around the world.
So, what would you recommend to somebody who is in L&D? What would they get out of participating in ISPI?
I mean, ISPI really, or any professional association, whether it's the Association for Talent Development or Learning Guild or some kind of broader SHRM, Society for uh, Human Resources. I mean, it's get out of your box, get out of your office, get out of your organization, go get some perspective of what other entities are doing, what other people are doing. How do you measure up? What are the new trends? And just to have kind of a network of people or around the world, kind of like-minded people. And then, if you find yourself out of a job, you're not starting from square one. You have a network already that you've spent years cultivating.
100% agree. Professional organizations are such a key part, and especially with people who are working remote, it makes you still feel connected. It gives you
Yes.
possibly local events to go to that maybe you're not going into an office to see your coworkers, but maybe you could find a way to connect with other people. I just recently joined my local chapter of SHRM. I've never been a member of SHRM before. I've been a
Good.
member of ATD for a long time. And it's been really kind of fun to go and see a broader perspective because I've been so L&D focused for so long, but I've
Yes.
recently taken on the HR business partners. So I'm like, I need to know more broad. So I've really enjoyed
Good for
those
you.
conversations. Yeah.
Good for you.
I know I've been to a couple of meetings with ATD and involved with some people from your organization, because you support it so strongly, and it's been really cool to, get to I mean, I knew you before, but that's really where we spent more time together is through
Yep.
ATD and some of your employees participating and volunteering as well, so, huge kudos on that, and I love that you promote that, and it's not just saying that it's important, but you're also supporting your employees to do it. I love it. I love it. So, learning and development, there's initiatives, there's training, but there's also this concept of just in time or on the job learning. How does an organization balance what they do, how they handle sort of those training needs?
Yeah. So I think, it's often talked about learning in the flow, or it's talked about as performance support. And I think it's, like anything, it's another tool in our toolkit to grab when it makes sense. So I think a simple way to look at it is often foundational learning, like you're getting grounded in a new job or a new field, that often needs to be formal learning. But if you're going along and you're just doing a task and like, what are the 5 steps to do this? I can't remember. That's a great place for performance support. And when we mean performance support, we just need a little nugget, a little job aid, a quick little video, like a screen simulation of those 5 steps in the computer application. So, in other words, you don't have to stop what you're doing, wait a month until they're running that training class, then go to that 4-hour training class when all you needed, were the five
Nothing.
steps.
No,
Yeah,
exactly. That
yeah,
one component. That is so fun. Like I think about some of the trainings that I delivered, might not have designed it, but I delivered back in the day. And I think, oh, we could have done that so much differently. Like, because and when we think about training intake, okay, what do I need to learn? What does somebody need to understand? And what's the process and the timing? But what we weren't really good at the time was asking how much do they need to know now versus later? Or you said in the flow, in the moment, like what what do they need to know that's foundational now? And then what can be created in some other way? Like you said, a job aid, quick reference guide, a video, something like that, I think about a lot of systems stuff. When I
Yes.
first was in sales and I was learning my first CRM, my customer relationship management,
Yes.
um, wow, that training was intense. And I just think, how did I even learn how to do that with all of those steps? I didn't even have my own book of business yet. So like all of it was theoretical. Oh my goodness. The idea of the in the moment performance support is so critical. And what I'm hearing you say, which I'm really loving, Lisa, is, performance support is sort of the umbrella, and there's all of these tools or strategies within it. So there's like L&D, there's sort of the performance support, there's formal training, there's sort of I love this idea of this broader concept that your team can support an organization to bring whatever is necessary to get that business outcome, back to that business outcome we talked about.
And especially where you want to do that is way up front before you just grab that training order and go build something inarticulate, right? That you just pause just for a minute and say, I know I can help you. Can I ask you a few questions? And then it's really like when you go to the doctor. You don't want the doctor to just look at you and say, "Okay, you need medicine or you need surgery." You want the doctor to have a conversation and ask a lot of questions and really figure out, you know what? If you just exercise or change your eating a little bit, we can skip the surgery. You want that to happen first.
Absolutely. I was actually a guest on a podcast earlier this morning, and the topic was about maximizing your engagement with subject matter experts related to training. But a lot of the conversation we spent talking about the intake process,
Yeah.
right? That like, what's the role of this need, but how do you identify where they fit, when, how, what their expectations are, their time frame, all of that. And it also is, you just talked about very early in the process is where you go, okay, what exactly are you looking for? How can I help you? Let me ask some questions. And organizations almost need to be trained to be okay with that intake process.
Yeah.
Some organizations just want to be like, here, make this for me.
Mhm.
But that doesn't work, especially whether you're an external support or you're an internal L&D team. That's not going to have the outcome that they're hoping for. And we have to retrain how they approach things so that we can get that better outcome at the end. And I love that you're talking about those good conversations early on.
Yeah, and I love the idea of kind of it's part of it's just typical that we do an intake process. It's just we don't skip that. It's just what we do here.
Yep, exactly. We're just assuming it. We're going to make it happen.
Mhm.
Um, all right, let's talk a little bit about the future of work. What are your thoughts? What are you seeing as far as like trends? What do you think is going to impact learning and development?
I don't know that it's any different than what we've talked about. I think certainly change is happening faster and faster and faster. But I worry a little bit again back to that human makeup. At some point we're going to be tapped out as far as how much faster or how much more change we can deal with as humans.
Yeah.
So again, I think it's really just pause for a minute. What's realistic? How much of this technology is helping? How much should we just put it aside and be humans and talk to each other and brainstorm and listen to each other? So I think the balance is really how is this technology helping us and when do we need to set it aside? Because I mean even hearing more and more clients are talking about they want to get back into the classroom. They wanna have some focused time, have it on the calendar, turn off the distractions, let me be with some of my colleagues, especially meet some people cross-functionally across the enterprise, and just have some time to be with each other and learn something new without 100 things coming at me at once.
Isn't it amazing? Like things kind of come back full circle. It was like, no, let's do everything remote, everything virtual, everything on my own, self defined, self identified. And now it's like, well, let's kind of come back to some of those original principles. But change fatigue is real. Change fatigue is the
Yes.
thing. We've been
Yes.
through a lot the past few years. And, kind of going back to the basics. Well, the basics worked for a reason. So
Good
going
for
back to that.
Yay, love that, Jonah.
I ask one last question. What would you suggest to somebody who is an aspiring L&D professional, somebody new to the industry, maybe somebody new to your team that you've hired, somebody that's coming out of college or interested in like pursuing it? What are some of the strategies you would suggest? What sort of advice would you give them?
Yeah, great question. I think it's first understand what this human performance improvement is. Get a grasp on that. Have an understanding of that concept. Really dig into the instructional design principles. Dig deep. I mean, that's what your degree or advanced degree should focus on. Learn to be a great writer. I mean, if you think about materials, training materials, they have writing. So become a good writer. Like to write if this is a field that you want to be in. Certainly be familiar with the tools. What do the tools do? When's the right time to use them? When's the wrong time to use them? And then get out of your box. Figure out where to go to meet other like-minded professionals. Make sure you're reading journals, watching videos, taking online tutorials, reading books, and make sure all of that's in context to the bigger world. So read a local newspaper, read a regional business publication, read a national and international kind of news source so that we're doing our craft in context of the bigger world and what the world needs, because the world needs what we do and our lens more than ever right now. So
Absolutely true. I feel like I want to take just that snippet of what you just said and share that with my students. I teach an HR class about L&D, and I feel like I just want that little snippet and share it with all of them. So
do it. Do it.
great synopsis. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate all of your knowledge and your contribution to our industry. So thank you so much. Very grateful that you were on today.
No, it's super fun to talk with you as always. Thanks, Jennifer.
This has been Fully Engaged with Jennifer N. Sutherland. If you're interested in discovering how the art and science of leadership can combine to create exceptional workplaces, visit us at SutherlandTalentSolutions.com. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay fully engaged.